This week, it was revealed that an app by the name of HealthEngine was taking users' data and funneling it to law firms that might be interested in people that are after personal injury claims. Now, of course, this raises an array of questions about privacy. And so to debate that, we have our panelists this week. Jeremy Kirk is the executive editor of security and technology from Information Security Media Group. Ariel Bogle is the online technology reporter for the ABC's Science Unit out of RN. Just for people that have never heard of HealthEngine, let's just start there. What the hell is it?
HealthEngine is a tool that lets people book doctor's appointments online. And you might actually remember it got into a bit of trouble a few weeks back, even before these recent allegations. The Sydney Morning Herald reported that they had actually been fiddling with doctor reviews. So in addition to making appointments for doctors, you can also review your doctor. Did you have a good experience? Did you hate them? Did they have cold hands?
Did they not instantly give me the codeine that I asked for with very little justification?
But it turned out they'd been manipulating those reviews, making them a little more positive, perhaps, than they would otherwise be. And the CEO actually apologised for that. And now, following up, we have a bit more bad news for HealthEngine.
Did they make it positive because they were afraid about lawsuits?
That might have been part of it. I think it was also this app seemed to want to just send a positive message. It didn't want to deal with those negatives around medical treatment. It just wanted people to be able to book appointments, to choose a doctor that seemed good and eliminate the doctors that seemed bad. So you just book with whoever was most convenient rather than assessing being able to sort good from bad, basically.
Jeremy, technically, what they were doing, was it illegal?
With the reviews?
Yeah. No, not the reviews, with the coming back to the news this week, the data stuff.
Well, that's a good question. So basically, when you signed up with HealthEngine, you would go through this you'd put your personal details in, and they considered that as having consent to these other marketing practices. However, when you looked at the consent box, and they published this after the ABC published its story, you would fill in your personal details, and the dialog box kind of said, hey, come for a free hearing scan. And it noted that your information may be shared with audiologists, but it didn't indicate that actually HealthEngine has this large marketing program behind it that could give your personal details to law firms, to credit agencies that specialize in sort of funding cosmetic surgery. So a lot of people looked at this and said, hey, I didn't realize when I signed up for this that my data would be going here. And so it created a big outcry among consumers, created a big outcry among medical practices that use the booking platform on their end. So the question right now for the OAIC and the Digital Health Agency is it complying with the Privacy Act? Under the Privacy Act, companies are supposed to be open and transparent about how they use people's data. And so that's a question that's going to be examined.
Is this an issue of the language just being a little bit on the opaque side?
Well, I think it's kind of much in the presentation, because when you looked at the pop-up dialog box, it had links to the terms and conditions, it had links to a collection notice, and also I believe that maybe the privacy policy too. So only if you click beyond that splash box and read those policies, and I actually read the privacy policy, which is one of these awful things you have to do as a technology journalist sometimes. And HealthEngine actually did disclose that it does use marketing partners and it would pass your data on to other things. But people obviously didn't read that, and the question is this open enough to consumers when they hit that service that this is what potentially is going to happen to your data? And the big issue also is that HealthEngine alleges that we had consent and that you could use the app without consenting to that sort of marketing. But many people went through it and said, the ABC said, no, you can't opt out of it. And many people said, no, we see no way to opt out of it.
That's right. I think this is a thing called click wrap consent, I believe. So that's when you are presented with a box when you log into a site, as you mentioned, a pop-up box that says, do you accept? And in the small print below, it says, read through to privacy notice, collection notice, or whatever.
Love to see the click-throughs on that, Tom.
Yes, and unless you...
It's like currently just Jeremy and Ariel and no one else.
Exactly. So unless you clicked accept, you can't really use the service. And this is actually something that is being fought over in Europe at the moment. We've talked a lot on this show about the GDPR, those new data privacy and data collection rules. Well, over there, they're getting a bit more serious about digital platforms that use this kind of tactic, that they say that you must be able to opt out of certain policies. You mustn't be completely locked out of a service because you refuse for your data to be collected in certain circumstances. And the other thing about HealthEngine's consent is there's a debate over whether it is informed consent. As you mentioned, you have to click through not to just one privacy policy where all the details are laid out, but multiple. One bit of information about the fact that your details might be shared with law firms was only in one section of those notices and not in the other. So you really had to go above and beyond to understand what was happening with your data. And as has been mentioned, that is potentially a contravention of the Australian privacy principles. We will have to see.
Would a company like HealthEngine be able to exist without that marketing apparatus?
It's a very good question. I'm actually not fully cognizant of HealthEngine's full business model, but certainly they are monetizing data. I went on their page and I have a little plugin on my browser that lets me see what trackers are on a web page just out of interest. And they had all the typical web trackers that you might see on another commercial site like an eBay or some sort of digital shopping site. It had Google AdWords, it had Facebook trackers, it had all the trackers necessary to sort of create data collection around people for commercial purposes. I don't know what they're doing with that data exactly, so I'm not making any allegations there, but certainly they have a business model that puts them a little bit more in the social media camp than a paid-for service.
Because after 6 years of the show, I know people are going to ask, what's the tracker that people can install? Because I know people are going to want to do that.
There's quite a few, but there's one from the Electronic Frontier Foundation in the US called Privacy Badger, which is probably a good one to try out.
All right, there is lots more of this in the podcast. If you download this show, it is available now in all good and mediocre podcast apps. Also the ABC Listen app, which is one of the good ones. See ya.